Okay. Are we live here? I guess so. Long day today. Long day today. I just I finished mowing the lawn, going to the gym, doing other stuff. Coming here. I'm gonna do this now. Let's see if this works. I'm using a different stream. On this. Hey, the hell? Trying to get rid of some stuff. Well, what I'm going to do now is do a live tutorial on how I use Lightroom. Just make sure everything's working here. There we go. Connected. Bueno. Bueno. All right, folks. All right, well, let's just go ahead and get started then. I'm going to first shrink myself down. Don't need to see me like this. And then I'm going to put me over here like that. And that should do it. That should be just fine. Okay, great. Is anyone even here yet? Well, it is a little late, but that is quite all right. I'm just checking on some stuff here. Okay. And anyways, this will be up for a while. And okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and get started here because I am live and streaming. Should probably have checked this before. Okay, anyways, so we are now in Lightroom. As you can see over here, well, whenever you fire Lightroom up, the first thing I do is I go over here to Library, because what I currently do is actually, let me back up here because there's something very important I want to point out when it comes to workflow. I am going to bring up this right here. So this is how I usually have things set up. Now I have my C drive over here. That is all of my programs. Only my C drive is going to have my programs on it, okay? Now, the other drive I use is my jobs drive. So I put all the pictures that I'm going to work on in my jobs drive because I don't want those pictures on my C drive, because you want your computer to use your C drive to operate your programs, and then you want it to look over at your jobs drive or a separate drive to find the pictures that you're working on. You don't want everything working off of one hard drive, because it will be looking for information over here, then it has to go over here. It has to do a lot of jumping around. So it actually makes things a lot faster by having two different drives, one for your programs, one for your pictures. And then once I'm done with the jobs on this drive, I move it over to an archive drive. Of course, now you see I have a lot of things over here in my jobs drive I need to move over, but I also need to get some new archive drives. I was kind of pulling some stuff over and getting things ready for the internet for a couple of things I was working on. Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm going to have some pictures over here in this tutorial A1 folder. So let's just say I had my camera and I took these pictures and I moved it over from my camera onto this this folder here. And you can see I have for to keep things nice and neat, I have each folder with the year, month, and day, and then a description of what that folder contains. In this case, it is my tutorial folder. And in most cases, I will have a folder, for example, over here. I was working on this recently. I was using two different cameras, my Nikon. I have my, let's see here. I have a capture folder, which is the right out of the camera, and then once I work on them, I put them in my process folder. And for this one, it was bracketed shots, so it's my merge, and then I stitched them together for a panorama, and then I have a finished folder, and then I have this folder over here for my Adobe files. Don't necessarily have to do all that stuff, but again, this tutorial here is just going to be kind of broad strokes of how to use Lightroom, but I do want to kind of point out the workflow and the file management. So for this case, I moved pictures over into this drive. Now these are not my pictures. This picture is my picture, but these are not. I'll tell you why in a second. But for the time being, to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open File. I'm going to do a new catalog. I'm then going to go over to the folder that my pictures are in. And I always create a new folder here, and I call it my Adobe folder, and this is where the backups are going to go. The catalog, a bunch of other stuff. I put my Lightroom catalog in there, and I will call this tutorial. That, and then hit create. Now that's going to close out Lightroom, and then it will then reload Lightroom. So for the time being, we have to wait for it to reload. So don't freak out if you create a new catalog. Lightroom will reopen. It's just creating a new catalog. Once Lightroom opens back up, and it will take a second here, what you want to do is go over here to your library folder, your library tab. It's still loading up. There we go. And now you want to import them. Now you can either drag and drop them over here, or you can go over here to your import button, and then this thing will pop up here. And then it'll ask you, where is it at? So it is on my jobs folder. Go down to it, tutorial A. It's going to be inside that folder there. Those are the ones I want to import. Now, before you import them, go over here to your right-hand side. When it comes to build previews, I'm not going to get into all the details of what every single little thing does. What I have is, I have it set for standard. I also click on build smart previews. I'll tell you what that is in a second. I don't really worry about these two here. And then you can enter in some keywords if you want to. This will help you find some stuff later on. Let's say you have like thousands and thousands of pictures and you're trying to find one that was on the levee of the river. You can type in levee or something in the search field, and then you can find those from catalogs and stuff. For the time being, we're just going to put in stuff, pictures, tutorial, and then click on. You can also have a preset that and sometimes I'll do this for certain things. I'm not going to really get into that, but I do have some metadata over here. This is like copyright information that will be embedded in the file whenever it's done, and just to kind of save you some time. So whenever you have your pictures selected from the folder over here, you have all the ones that you want to import. Click on standard, click build smart previews, and then hit import. Now the smart previews will help you quickly zoom in and out of pictures. It creates like this, I believe it creates this little JPEG version of the image. Not 100% sure, but anyways, so up here, now we have our pictures. Now we want to work on the pictures. So what we are going to do is go over to our develop tab over there, and now we can work on this. Now let's just say you have a ton of pictures. Now I do want to point something out. These are not my pictures. I did not want to select my pictures because I would have to use either pictures of me, which would be a little awkward, pictures of my girlfriend, which might make her mad, or pictures of people that I have already taken photos of and which I feel that I would have to get their permission to, because I wouldn't want to ruffle any feathers. So instead of going through all that, I have these files from somebody else. Now these are raw files. A raw file is not like a JPEG. A JPEG is a compressed file. A raw file is uncompressed and contains a ton of information. Lots of information that you can pull back. If you've blown out highlights, or you can recover dark shadows, there's a lot of leeway when it comes to shooting raw files. Every camera company has their own raw file extension. For example, if you have a Canon camera, your raw images will end in a .cr2, I believe. If you have a Nikon camera like I have, it will end in a .nef file. And there's also a .dng file. If you look down here, this is a color tone .dng. DNG means digital negative. That's like Adobe's sort of generic raw file. But I always suggest you shoot in RAW. And if you can shoot in 16-bit, even better. I'm not going to go into, well, I guess I could go into preferences here and kind of show you what I have as far as my workspace goes in Lightroom. Once it pulls up here, your color space, this is the way I have it set. My file format is set for TIFF. My color space is Adobe RGB, 16-bit. That's the way I have it usually set. It's the best type of resolution. And then as far as that goes, I'm not going to really get into anything else besides that. But the important thing is the Adobe RGB. That's the color space that I work in when I'm working on this stuff. However, whenever I export for the web, I do export and convert it to sRGB. The web uses sRGB. Just want to get that out of the way there. Okay, so now that we have our pictures in here, let's begin with looking at, now I did take this one picture here, and the reason why I took this picture, included this picture, is because I want to show you what chromatic aberration is. Now this is one picture of several dozen pictures I took of this particular machine here. I took some pictures sort of lower and some higher, and I stitched them together to create a large panorama. It's what's called bracketing, and it's a bracketed panorama. So this is just one selection of those, but I chose this one because I want to show you something up here called chromatic aberration. Because whenever I start, I don't start over here at basic. I start down here at lens correction. But I want to show you a little bit about this layout of what you're seeing here. So over here is just a preview of your image. Down here is your presets. A lot of people will use presets. You can choose these to get a certain look out of your image. If you kind of go through these, you'll see it changes some of the settings. Sometimes people will sell their own presets. I don't really use presets anymore. I will only use presets if I have a whole lot of images in one scene or one location. I will then create a preset that will fix the white balance and fix some of the other details in the image that sort of correspond over several different pictures. I'll adjust one picture, create a preset, highlight all of those pictures, and then I will use a button over here that says sync, but I'll get into that later. Other than that, I don't really use the rest of these at all. I have presets over there just because of what I was talking about, creating a preset to sort of adjust a large group of pictures at one point. You can also create a preset to be a default preset. Whenever you import them, it will then apply a bunch of changes, whatever you want, whenever you do import those. Then you have your main image over here, and then over here is your main workspace, and you've got your histogram over here. Your histogram is going to be how the light is being how your light is working in your picture. You'll see at the very far left is going to be your extreme black end. Then over here to your extreme right is your white end. So if you look over here, these little triangles at the top, whenever those are lit up like that, you will see that I'm clipping in some areas, which was kind of the point of this picture here, because I was doing a bracketed shot, so I wanted to get all the shadows and all the highlights. But I'll show you more of that in a second. But this is your histogram. And you kind of want your histogram to sort of be more towards the middle as much as possible so that you have detail in your shadows and details in your highlights. Then underneath that, you have some of the tools over here, and then you have your workspace right here. And this is what you'll mainly be using after you've imported your pictures. All right, so we've imported our pictures. They are down here at the very bottom. Now let's say we want to work on some of these pictures. What we're going to do, what I do first is I go to my lens correction. Now the lens correction here is going to, if you look at this, you have two options. You have remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. So when I enable profile correction, watch what happens to the picture. You see how it is kind of distorted and it's taking that distortion out of the picture? That is because whenever you import your pictures, there is some file information in those pictures along with it. And this talks to Lightroom and it tells it what kind of camera you have and what kind of lens you have. And then Lightroom knows how to adjust that image to sort of eliminate the barrel distortion that the lens kind of creates. So that is that shift of distortion there. It also gets rid of that vignetting. You see these sort of dark edges. Then it helps eliminate that. Now, sometimes I like the way it looks without my profile correction, but in this case, especially if you're going to stitch a whole lot of pictures together, I would typically always enable profile corrections. Now this chromatic aberration, what that is, let's take a look up here. So as this loads up, you'll see this pink, this pink line right there along this little pole right there. Now, this is a result of the lens and how light interacts with the lens. This is called chromatic aberration. So watch what happens to this pinkish hue whenever I click on remove chromatic aberration. It pretty much disappears. Now, chromatic aberration comes in a variety of colors. You've got pink, and you've got some blue, and you've got some mauve in there and stuff. So sometimes you'll have to manually remove that chromatic aberration. So let's turn that off and let's go to manual. You'll see you have some options down here. So what you can do is you can, for example, set pink hue, move that over here to the right. You'll see it kind of disappearing. Sometimes you'll have this sort of purplish bluish hue of a chromatic aberration, and you can kind of right there, you can kind of adjust that a little bit. Pull that over, you can kind of, maybe that's just the actual pole itself. Yeah, that's doing some stuff. But anyways, so that is what chromatic aberration is. Sometimes you don't really have to use it. Sometimes it does kind of mess with the picture, but in this case, I just kind of wanted to show you what chromatic aberration is and why you would select that. So that is what I start off with right there. And then a lot of times what I will do is, in this case, I'll go from lens correction down here to transform. Now, one thing that absolutely drives me crazy when it comes to pictures is when lines are not straight. So in this case, you see this line, this wall right here is kind of straight, but then these lines, it makes you look like the room is at a tilt. And then if you put a marble on the floor, it would roll over here on this side. So whenever you have images that have lines in the background, telephone poles or brick walls or wherever it is, and you want to get those lines straight to not drive me crazy and possibly you crazy, what you need to do is you can always go over here and choose auto, and it might help out a little bit. In this case, not, because now that line is straight, but not that line is straight. So what you do is, what I always do is I go to guided right there. Now the guided transform tool will let you do 4 lines to straighten your horizontal and your vertical. So what you do is you go to guided and you're going to find 2 lines for your horizontal and 2 lines for your vertical. So for this case, we're going to go for this brick wall here. You'll see this little preview window on the right, and just draw a line from this point up there. You can see that little line there to right there. It doesn't have to be exact. Now it's not going to change anything because it's looking for a second line. For the second line, let's go over here to this little edge in the middle there, and you can choose whatever one you want, and that one. So that will straighten that line and then that line. And now our lines are pretty much straight. That one, not so much, but it's better than it was before. Now, if you really want to get nitpicky about your straight lines, there is a thing in Photoshop called, it's a filter called adaptive wide angle, and you can just do straight lines to your heart's content. Now, for this one, there's not really a straight line across here, but if you wanted to, you can always just see what this looks like. So you want to straighten that one out there. Still looks a little funky, but yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it for this one, but that's the gist of what this particular thing does. I'm just highlighting and deleting. So that's what transform does. I would do that in case there are lines in the background that I want straightened out. From this point, I would go over to my basic tab. Now, this is where you're really going to make your photos sing. So I'm going to go to this picture here. So the first thing to do when using this basic tab here is you want to get your white balance. So if there's anything in your picture that is pure white or 50% gray, you can use that to adjust your white balance. Or close to 50% gray. So anything that is gray or 50% gray or white, choose this little tool there, click on something that is white, or click on something that is gray. Now you can see a very subtle change because the white balance is already pretty good in this picture. But that is what white balance does. That is how you get your white balance. The reason why you want to adjust your white balance is so that your skin tones are correct. What this is doing is it is telling Lightroom what in the picture is actually white. It then forces that area to be white or be 50% gray. It knows what you're trying to do, and then it will adjust the other colors accordingly. So it's very important to do that. If not, your skin tones could be a little too reddish or something like that. It won't look all that great. Another thing you can do is you can go over here to your custom tab and you can choose auto, and it will try to figure out what exactly is white in that scene. In this case, it looks pretty good. It looks a little warm, but again, you can choose that as being great. And that to me looks like it would, how it would actually look in real life. But if you wanted to, this temperature up there, let's say you want to warm things up, you can slide it a little bit over here to your right. You can kind of warm it up some. So it looks like it was shot around sunset. Or you can slide it a bit over here to the left and kind of cool it down. So it looks like it's more in the winter time. But let's kind of keep it to where it was at. Click on this is a gray apron, so that's why I'm choosing that. At this point, you want to go down here to your exposure, your contrast, your highlights. So what is this stuff here? Can you just choose auto? You can, and see what it does for you. But let me tell you a little bit about what these things here do. I'm not going to use this picture. Let's use this one here. So I like the white balance in this one because before there's nothing in here that is white to click on. If you choose auto, it looks kind of okay, but now her skin looks a little orange to me. So I'm going to kind of go with what it was before. So let me tell you what these sliders here do. So exposure does pretty much what you think it's going to do. Now this is a DNG file. So there's a lot of leeway that we have here because we are messing with a raw picture. Now, if you go up here to your histogram and look at this, you see this little triangle there? I want to hover over it. Whenever you hover over that or click on it, whenever it's white, it's telling you that the blackest areas are pure black and there's no detail in there. Over here in this triangle, if it is white, that means you're clipping your white area and that the areas that are pure white are being clipped and there is no information in that. So in this case, I have it turned on. It's showing you the areas that are clipped on the black end, which means there's no information. But that isn't to say that you can't get that information back. So what you can do is you can go down here to either your shadows or your blacks and move those up. What is the difference between shadows and black? Shadows deals with the mid-tone black. Black means the overall black levels. Whenever you do adjust the black or the white levels, you start to get into this hazy area almost. So I don't really adjust those too much unless there is an extreme situation. So in this case, this image looks well exposed. I'm not going to mess with the exposure, but if you do mess with the exposure, it is really just, let me turn this off. It is really just kind of dimming the photo or brightening the picture up. I like the way that this is exposed, so I'm not gonna, maybe you can just bump it up just a tad like that, maybe. Contrast is up to you. Some people like really contrasty, crunchy images. I'm not a huge fan of contrasty images. The highlights, that is going to be the areas that are being affected by the light. So you see this highlight here on her face, this highlight here on her cheek, the highlight there on her, whatever that's called, highlight there on her shoulder blades, the brighter areas as opposed to the shadows. So you have your shadows over here, you have your bright areas over here on the shoulders. So that is what is affected when you move this up. You can see it as I'm moving my highlights up, those highlight areas are getting brighter. So if your highlights on your image are just too bright, you can always bring that down a tad. It doesn't really affect the image overall too much. It's really just affecting the highlights. Let's see here, let's just kind of do that. Shadows is pretty interesting because it is going to bring up the shadows. So you'll see the shadows over here. Again, if you click on that area, you will see the purest, darkest areas. When I move shadows up, you'll start to see those areas kind of disappearing as you're getting the information back in those areas. And now you're seeing her clothing getting a little bit brighter. Now, it is up to you. It's getting a little bit grainy down there as far as noise goes. Now it's up to you how much you want to restore the shadows in this particular image here. It is good to have shadows in your image to create a sort of dynamic, three-dimensional, not so much of a flat look. So the shadows is important, but I do want a little bit more information in those shadow areas. I would do something like that personally. Well shot scene, but anyways, the whites just kind of do what this does. Kind of affects the overall whiteness in the image, the overall white levels in the image. The brighter areas you see are getting extremely bright. So, and then the overall black area, again, there's the clipping there. And then if you bring it all the way over here, you can see that the information that was lost in those areas is now back. But it is important to have it be a little bit bright in some areas, dark in other areas, to create a dynamic image. Okay, so now we had that adjusted and we can see that now nothing's being clipped. Fantastic. Now the difference over here on texture and clarity. Now texture and clarity isn't necessarily something that you would want to have on human skin, and I'll show you why. Let's see here. Not the most, it's not, it's fine. If you bump up clarity and if you bump up texture, the texture is great for things like cakes and food and things that have texture to them. You wouldn't want to crank up texture too much because you get that. It makes her look ugly, right? But her hair looks kind of cool. But that is what texture does. It's bringing out the texture in her hair and her face. So I would not adjust that for skin. Same thing goes with clarity. This is good for sky images, but if you crank up the clarity, look, it just makes it look really ugly. However, if you bring clarity down, ooh, it's smoothing the skin out. However, it's affecting everything else. Now, you can do this if you want to. There are much better ways to clean up the skin than using that. I only use clarity for pictures outside, you know, stuff with like the sky, and I would use clarity with like a brush. I would select a brush and then I would select clarity up a little bit and I would sort of apply it to a certain area. I would do this for maybe some interior shots maybe, but not when it comes to people. So texture and clarity, I don't really mess with. Dehaze is good for sky stuff as well. I'll use dehaze when it comes to nighttime sky stuff to kind of get rid of light pollution and things like that to kind of see the stars better. Now, what's important also is down here you have vibrance and saturation. Now, the difference between vibrance and saturation is that vibrance will try to affect the colors without affecting the skin tone. Now, it will affect the skin tone. Actually, and this isn't a very good example. Let me use this one here of what vibrance does. So over here, I have already kind of reset that one there. So vibrance, as you can see, is making the makeup on the lips and the clothing a bit more saturated, but not really affecting the skin tone too much. It does affect the skin tone, so I usually bump up vibrance a little bit. Saturation affects all the colors, no matter what. If you bring saturation all the way down, you've got black and white. If you pump it up too much, you'll get this really kind of ugly effect. It might be better using saturation for interior shots like this. If you crank up saturation, you'll see the yellow and the suitcase there is popping a bit more. But when it comes to people, you know, I don't bump up saturation too much, or if anything at all, and just kind of bump up vibrance. And then this kind of affects the lips and the hair, and it kind of keeps the skin tones looking natural. So that is what that does. So use vibrance when you're affecting, for me at least, use vibrance to affect the scene without really affecting the skin too much, and use saturation to affect the overall saturation of the image. Like so. So, look okay. So when it comes to tone curve, moving on. Tone curve is a way to adjust the contrast in the scene as well. This is kind of like another way of using this up here. Sometimes a lot of people like to give a little bit of a downward curve to the black area and an upwards curve to this, what's called an S curve, you know, to the highlights. Honestly, I never really use this too much. So I kind of, anyways, but that's what that does. Some people will adjust. I'll just kind of show you what some people do here. They'll go to this RGB channel and they'll do an S curve for each one of these to create a certain signature look, you know, the Peter McKinnon way of doing things. It really is up to you on what you want to do. But if you double click on these things in here, it will kind of cancel out what you're doing. Same thing up here. If you double click on, let's see here, tone, yeah, or WB or whatever, it will reset those levels. So a little shortcut there in Lightroom. If you're messing with this and you want to reset these levels without kind of going over each one and double clicking, you can double click on the little pointer and that will bring it to 0. Control Z brings it back. Or if you want to reset the entire thing, double click on something in here and that will, like tone, for example, or presence. That'll bring it back to the 0 point. If you want to mess with tone curve to adjust your, over here is your dark region, over here is your white or your lights. Just gonna bring down your brightness that way, bring up your overall black point that way. Really, I kind of do this in the basics over there, but some people like to do a little S-curve to kind of create this sort of contrasty look. I don't really use tone curve too much, but that's what tone curve does. Now, HSL in color is pretty cool. The hue is when you can affect the overall hue of an image. We have green over there, so we can kind of affect the, let's see here. Yeah. I don't really use hue very often. If I want to change the color in something, I'll do it in Photoshop. The two things I do use in HSL, which is hue, saturation, luminance, is saturation and luminance. So a saturation is if you want to change a certain color in here or take it out. Let's see this blue area down there. Let's say you want to take that blue area out. Just take your blue and move it all the way to the left and it will kind of turn it, the blue off. Now, if you want to selectively pick an area to change, there's this little circle right there, this little picker. Choose that and it will change your cursor from an arrow to this. At that point, you can go over here and you can select an area and click and drag up. You can see over there, it is just oversaturated that blue area. Or you can click on this area here, this paint on the lips, bring that down. And that kind of turns that gray. So that is a way that you can kind of, you can do this effect where, let's just say you want to have just the blue there and in the dress, you can just bring everything down but blue. Actually, there's a bit of purple in there as well. Something like that, you know, or, you know, you can bring the color in the lips back. That does affect the skin tone, so if you really wanted to do that kind of cool look where just one color is in a black and white image, I would do that in Photoshop. You can do it here with an adjustment brush, but whatever. That's what saturation does. It can selectively saturate certain colors in your image. Luminance is the brightness of those colors. So again, we had that blue there. If we bring the blue luminance up, you'll see it gets a tiny bit brighter. Bring it all the way to the end, it gets darker. Same thing, you can choose this little circle there, this little picker, and click and drag on an area and drag it up, for example, and we are brightening up those lips with the paint on it. So that is what HSL does. I usually only mess with saturation and luminance to either adjust the saturation for a certain color in a certain area or the brightness of a certain color in a certain area. So when it comes to split toning, that is a way that you can kind of achieve your own look. For example, there is a very popular, let me make sure I'm still streaming here. Yeah. It's a very popular sort of gold and blue look. So let's say you wanted to have a split tone image of that gold and blue thing. So your highlights, you want to have gold, and then your shadows, you want that to be blue. It's a very popular split tone thing that people do. So to do that, you would go over here to your little rectangle right there. Select that. Select a gold area right there. And then go down here and select a blue area right there for your shadows. And then you can affect the saturation of those. So there's your original image. You can bring up the saturation of that gold and the highlights. and bring up the blue saturation in those shadows to create a certain sort of bluish and goldish look there. And the balance will either adjust what is stronger, the highlights or the shadows. So that is what split toning does if you want to have your own little look. A lot of people will have their own look and they'll have a preset for their particular split toning that they do. Detail is an important one, and I'm going to show you a hidden feature of Lightroom. So every picture needs a little bit of sharpening to it. This picture here has 0 sharpening. So what we're going to do, let's kind of zoom in a little bit more here to show you what the, now I don't usually sharpen stuff in Lightroom. I will sharpen and do noise reduction in Photoshop. The sharpening and the noise reduction in Lightroom is okay, but you can get a much better effect in Photoshop. But that's a tutorial for another day. Coca-Cola Classic is what that is. So let's just say that we do want to sharpen, for example, the hair there. Let's bring up sharpening a bit. So you can see what's happening here, the sharpening. Now, it's important to use a masking when it comes to sharpening. Hold down, here's a little inside detail here. Hold down the Alt key. If you have a Mac, it is Option. So Alt or Option. Hold down that and then slide masking over. That creates this sort of black and white odd image here. Now what you're doing is you don't want to sharpen the entire image. You want to sharpen just the edges of the stuff, you know. So you don't want to sharpen the skin. If you do, that's what you're sharpening. You're sharpening all the areas of the skin there. You want to sharpen just the edges. So you want to sharpen like the hair, you want to sharpen just the lines there. So that is what you're masking out. So the white areas there are being affected. So again, holding down Alt and moving your masking slider will show you what you're actually masking out. So the white areas are the things that will be sharpened. So now we're going to sharpen the hair there. And so again, if you hold down the Alt key and you slide your sharpening over, you can get a better look at what is being sharpened. You can see that the hair now is starting to pop a bit. Radius effects on the radial area that is being sharpened. So a smaller radius affects a smaller area of sharpening. A larger one will affect, I'll just show you here. Again, holding down the Alt key and sliding this over will show you what is being affected. So you can see there, the radius is affecting more of the image. It's starting to look a little ugly. And then down there, you'll see that we're kind of achieving the goal that we want and kind of getting the hair sharpened a bit more. And detail will try to keep the details when you're sharpening. So this here is an important little feature. Holding down the Alt key while sliding those will reveal to you what you are actually doing as opposed to kind of gauging what it is like in color. Sometimes looking at it in black and white is much more helpful. Now noise reduction, there's no noise really in this area. Actually, let me see here. Down here we saw some noise a little earlier on. Noise is, see how it's like, it's kind of hard to see, but you've got these sort of reddish dots in there. Looks almost like digital errors. Well, anyways, actually, I don't know if we have the information on, I don't really care. Yeah, here's f9 180 ISO 200. That's kind of strange. It must be a smaller megapixel thing. But so you get noise whenever you shoot images at a very high ISO. Usually you'll have to do this when it's very dark in a scene. You have to crank up your ISO and you'll get these noisy effects in your image here. So to do that, again, if you hold down your Alt key and slide the noise over there, it'll start to smooth out. You'll see some smoothing going on there. So releasing the Alt key, you see how it will happen. As I slide the noise over there, it will take a look at the pixels in the image and it will average out what is around those pixels that are kind of different, creating that noise effect, and it will try to smooth out the noise, that little grainy look to it. But whenever you do that, you're also affecting the skin tone as well. And so again, so you can see how with no noise reduction, looks like natural skin, but when you pull that noise over there, it kind of smoothens it out. That's because it's trying to lessen the noise in the image. I don't use noise reduction in Lightroom. I have a noise reduction filter and I use in Photoshop that's will protect skin tones and stuff, but it's called noise aware. So that's what that stuff does. I don't usually mess with noise reduction in Lightroom, but sharpening is usually pretty good just to kind of get things going. And then we've already done lens correction. We've already gone over it. This one doesn't really need it. There's no chromatic aberration, but you can enable the, let's see, this was shot with a Canon. Doesn't show the type of Canon, but 85mm. Yeah, a little bit of distortion, but not much. And transform, you wouldn't usually use transform for this one. I mean, you can, I would get rid of this altogether, but I would do that in Photoshop though. And then effect is if you want to do vignetting. So if you move it to the left, you'll get this nice vignette. If you move it to the right, you'll get more of a white vignette. And if you want to add grain, grain is if you want to add sort of like this film grain to it for a certain look. Calibration is if your camera is doing something weird and you can kind of adjust calibration for that. But that's really it when it comes to using Lightroom. When it comes to the tools up here, let me show you what the tools do real quick. There's some cool features in this. So this is your crop tool. If you click on that, you can either crop out your image there and put her in. So here's the thing, she's looking out of frame. So if I'm going to crop, I would do this. Have her looking that way, and then I would Photoshop this out of there. But if you use your crop tool and you hit the O button on your keyboard, your little diagram here, which will help you with the rule of thirds, will change. So if you hit O, you get that. Now these are these aesthetic tools you can use. So you hit O again, you have that. There's the golden ratio thing. So if you have like a beach scene or something where you want to sort of pull the eye in to a certain area, you can use this little overlay here by hitting the O key, and then kind of just other optional grids. I usually only have it set to this, but that's your cropped key. This angle here is if you want to straighten something in your scene. Let's say you want to straighten it out for her shoulders, or you would usually use this for like architecture. If you have a building, something interior shot where you have a fireplace, you want to make sure that your fireplace is level. But just for the sake of this here, let's just kind of click on angle. I'll show you what it does. You click on angle. You have a little level you see there on the thing, and then you would click on one point and then the level of that over there, and then that will make her shoulders straight, or the fireplace thing straight, or whatever it is that you want straight, it will make that straight. And then it'll make a little crop here because it doesn't have any information beyond that point, but whatever. Get rid of that. That's what that does. You can also choose this over here, original. You can choose the formats, like 8x10. This crops to a certain print level that you want to have. Let's say you want to print an 8x10. You can go with that and then kind of crop it however you want to fit that 8x10 look. Or if you want the Instagram one by one look, you can do that and adjust it for the one by one look. So that's what the crop tool does. Now this spot removal over here. Oh yeah, once you're done cropping, just click done down there. Now spot removal, let's look at this picture over here, because spot removal, you click on spot removal, that little button right there, and then you'll get this, it's kind of hard to see, but you see this little, almost like a bullseye instead of your arrow cursor. And then you can use this to get rid of like a zit or a mark on the wall, or really anything that you want kind of removed within reason. In this case, the little dot right there. Now for me, I don't remove anything in a photograph that, I don't remove it if it will still be there in 2 weeks. Like if someone has a scar on their face, I'm not going to remove the scar. If someone has you know what I'm saying, a mole on their face. I'm not going to remove the mole, but if someone has like a zit or something, I'll remove that. So your little cursor here, if you move the mouse wheel up and down, it will resize it. And then so you just place it over whatever area that you don't want there, and then click on it, and then it will choose an area that it thinks should be replacing that area. In this situation, it has chosen an area with an eyelash, so you just choose the area that Lightroom has selected and then just move it somewhere else. And then it will attempt to heal that area. Now there is two options. If you right click, you have clone and heal. Clone, what clone will do is it will just take an exact copy of what is over there and put it right there. Sometimes that's okay. Healing will do that. It will do the very similar, but what it does is it more applies the texture of the area and then applies the color of the area in that scene. Cloning just takes the area and moves it over there. Healing will take the texture of the area, if I'm saying this correctly, and will apply the texture of the area and then also try to blend in the color as well. So this is good for getting rid of blemishes and stuff. Healing brush, and then you can kind of just go through here and just kind of heal things up. So that's what that clone over there does. Now down here you have some tool overlays. You can choose to this will help you sort of find bad areas that you might want to fix. Your tool overlay here, auto, this will show you, if you have it on always, this will show you all the little areas that you've healed or cloned out. So I usually have it on auto, so whenever you scroll over it, it will show you kind of what it is. Again, for me, I don't do blemish removal in Lightroom. I'll do it in Photoshop, but if you're working really quick, this is a tool that is fine to use. The red eye removal, if you have a DSLR camera, you're not going to really get any red eye, but if you do have red eye, all you got to do is just click that tool there and then click on the area that's red and sort of adjust that little thing. I've never used this tool though, because I don't really get red eye. The gradient tool is a pretty cool thing to use. I use this, well, I used to use this quite a bit. What's cool about the gradient tool, get rid of that there, is that one thing that I do, get rid of this. Now, you probably saw, whenever you use a tool here, it will have the settings that you had before. So let's just say I want to have all this stuff here zeroed out and start fresh. You just double click on effect and that'll zero that out. Let's just say that this image has, it was done at a party and you had this sort of blue hue on her shoulder there. What I would do is I would have a gradient, my gradient tool. I pull a gradient over from this side over here. And then I would choose this color down there and choose like a blue color to sort of match whatever is on her clothing or whatever. That's something I used to do a lot to kind of give this impression that there's a blue light over there making that area blue. So now you have this cool little blue hue over there. So it's a cool way to kind of make this neat little effect. But you can also use it for a variety of other reasons. You can select that one. Let's say we don't want to use blue. I'm going to get rid of that to white, and we want to just bring the exposure down for that area. Creates a gradient effect so that you can do a number of things. You don't have to do a color. You can do exposure. You can do shadows, texture, whatever you want to do with that gradient tool. I typically use it for what I just kind of explained here. I would make a gradient, put a color in like that or like that, and kind of give it the impression that there's a colored light over here casting onto her. Kind of a fun thing to do. The radial gradient tool is the same thing, but instead of doing a gradual gradient from left or right or from the top to bottom, it will do it in a circle. So kind of create your area there, bring it over where you want, and then from that point, bring your whatever you want down. And for this case, it's applying it inside the circle. Well, what you can do is you can flip it, click on that invert there, and then that will create that sort of vignette effect. Of course, you don't have to use exposure. You can do something else like, again, color or something like that and kind of create this cool little color effect there on the outsides if you want to. So again, kind of get creative, but that's what those tools do. The brush tool, let me show you this real quick here. Brush tool, again, you can kind of choose whatever. I don't know what this keeps bumping around for. So you click on your brush tool, your adjustment. Come on, man. Your adjustment brush here. And let's just say that we want to soften her skin tone, right? So we have our adjustment brush chosen. Click on clarity and bring clarity down some. It's not going to affect it yet because we haven't done anything to it yet. But down here, you'll see the size. If I choose size and enlarge that, you can enlarge your brush. The feathering brings out the sort of feathering of that effect on the edges. And flow is what is important. For this, when you have it set flow to low, think of it as you have a brush with a little bit of paint on it. And you apply it to an area with like one stroke. Actually, let me just do this. I'll explain it this way. Red. We're going to do a red stroke here. Flow it set to 100%. Okay, so there we go. There's our red stroke there. Let's see here. Kind of make this look correct of what I want. Okay, so that's one stroke with a flow of 100%. Let's get rid of that. If you have your flow way down here, and you stroke it, you can't really see anything. So it is applying a very thin layer. The more you brush over it, the more it is applying that. So when you have a very low flow, you can do very subtle changes over time. So that's what flow does. So usually I have my flow set pretty low. Get rid of all this stuff here. So let me show you what that clarity does here. So let's just bring clarity down pretty low. Let's bring our flow up to about 50%. Then let's brush over the skin. And you can see that as I am brushing over that skin, it is bringing the clarity of the skin down a whole bunch. Now, let me show you this real quick here. See this? Let's see, where did that? Oh yeah, show selected mask overlay. Click on that. It makes the area red. That's just kind of showing you what or where the area that you're working on and how it's being affected. So now I have affected this whole area here and that. Now I can turn this off, and this, by clicking on this, it just kind of shows you where you have painted over. Helpful little tool there. From that point, we can adjust our clarity. So if we bring our clarity all the way up, we see that and it's only affecting the area that we've brushed over. If we bring it all the way down, it softens the skin tone a whole lot. Now you can do this again if you wanted to. You can hit done and then do it again to soften it even more. Keep in mind though, whenever you do that, it makes the skin look a little waxy. So there's other better ways to soften the skin that I do in Photoshop, but this is a very fast and effective way, or fast and quick way of softening the skin. Again, let's kind of look over here. Let's do 1:2 ratio there. So again, we have our brush tool, clarity down there, flow over here. And then if you brush over this, you see that that area is beginning to soften up quite a bit. Let's just bring the flow high and see how that is being affected. But it keeps the skin tone. It's just sort of minimizing how the light gets into those small areas. Again, I don't use this in skin tones. I have other ways of doing it in Photoshop, but again, this is a quick way of doing skin softening by doing a brush and then doing clarity. You can tell just how dramatic that looks by just that one little slider there. Again, I wouldn't use that. And that's to say that you wanted to delete that. Just kind of click on that area there and then hit delete. Now, what I was just doing there when it comes to moving the area around, if you hold down your space bar, turns your cursor into a hand, and then you can kind of move that area around. So I use that quite a bit as well. Okay. And the last thing I will cover is presets. So over here we have some presets. Now I have a bunch of presets. You probably won't have all these presets over here, but I have my own presets as well. You see my Jay's presets that I have. This is for some stuff that I was doing at the museum. But I do have some presets. You'll have some like these presets over here. But color, kind of go through these, and you can probably get a desired look from what you're going for. This is a cool image here with lots of stuff. Let me get rid of these markers. What does Lightroom come with? I think you'll have these over here. Yeah, so you can kind of go through these presets to kind of get a certain look. I have some wedding presets down here that I've been kind of using for certain things. Lots of different looks for weddings and stuff. Again, I don't really use presets anymore, but I'm trying to think of. There's some cool things you can do with presets. Where is, yeah, light leaks are kind of cool. You can do this, you know, with, again, you know, they're really just kind of using gradients and filters and stuff to kind of, but this is just a quick way of doing it. But anyways, that's what presets does. I will use presets this way for my own. Let's just say that all of these pictures are from the same shoot. Come on, man, I want to get this. Reset that. Let's see, all these pictures are from the same shoot. What I can do is I can adjust the white balance in this scene. I can do some adjustments here of how I want this to certain kind of look like. Texture, bring clarity down, bring that up. Lens correction, do this. So let's say, ooh, it looks terrible. Bring it down. God. No, bring that. There we go. Christ. Okay, so let's just say that we had this looking the way that we want it to look, and we want to apply this look to all these pictures there. You can either do two things. You can go over here to that little plus icon by the presets and create a new preset, and then that will be done in your user presets, or you can create, you know, a new group. I have Jay's presets over here, so you can create a new group with those presets in there. Or what you can do, which is far more effective, is you get this picture looking the way that you want. You then shift and click to select the rest of the pictures, and then click on this sync button down there, and then click on all the stuff that you want to apply. So you can do check all and then do synchronize, and then this will put all that stuff that you just did on all these pictures right there. So now this picture has all those settings over here, and then this picture has all those same settings over here as well, and so on and so forth. So that is, I believe, your Lightroom Basics. So that is where I'm going to end right now. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how to use Lightroom. I don't like the way any of this looks, so I'm going to reset all that stuff there. Let's Control Z it. Okay. And that should be it. If you have any questions, let me know. I think that really covered just a very surface layer of Lightroom that will get you to a point where you can import some stuff and work on things. A lot of professional photographers will only use Lightroom to do certain things. Let me show you something else real quick here. When it comes to dodging and burning, when it comes to this image, one thing I like to do a whole lot is dodging and burning in Lightroom, which is you go to your adjustment brush up here, double click effect, zero it out, bring up your exposure just a tad, bring your flow down to right there. So, and then you can sort of adjust the hair or dodge and burn the hair to kind of bring up the highlights there. Another thing to do would be to put a bit of brightness in the cheek area over here. So do that. A little highlight on the under the cheek. Do a little bit of a highlight there on the edge of the lip of where the light hits. Also, you can tell on the eyes. So the way light works when it comes to eyes is that you can see your catch light right there. So the catch light is kind of above. It's hitting down here. It goes into the eye right there, and then it exits down here. You can see how that area right there is a bit brighter right there. So what you can do is you can bump up that area of the eye. It's a bit too much, but you kind of get the idea. Bring up just the exposure. Back it up a bit, and now the eyes pop a bit more. You can do an overall brightening of the eyes a bit. Now we can see. Whoa! Eyes a bit more. Bring out. If you do this too much, it'll start to get like zombie eyes, where they just look too bright and too weird looking, you know. So use it selectively. And again, what I do is I will. Come on, man. I will. God, that's way too much. I will just bump up the area just below where the catch light is at. That's me. And then I do some just general dodging and burning when it comes to where the light is sort of hitting, you know, like right there and stuff. Right there. Maybe on the chin a little bit. In this case here. Come on, man. I don't know why it's going so slow right now. There. This is back to where it was before, but if you select your brush tool, I like to see how the hair is highlighted in certain areas. Bring out that part. There. Eyes. Oh, too much. Cheek area right there. Again, just kind of dodging and burning the hair where the light hits. This is a bit of a extreme example here, but the folds of the hair where the light hits. Come on, man. What it's doing. And then you can create a new brush. Oops. New brush. Bring that down to increase the darkness in certain areas, like right there. And already it looks, you know, a lot better than what it did before. So there's your after, and then there it was before. And then there it was before. So that's a highly recommended technique of dodging and burning, and just really kind of making the hair and the eyes and the lips and the cheekbones kind of pop. So try that out. Okay, well with that, there's lots of other crazy techniques you can use. That's just one called dodging and burning really quickly there. Okay, well I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and do some other stuff now. Okay, have a good night.